followed by the Pledge of Allegiance, and we invite you to join us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have announcements this evening, and we have one proclamation. Our announcements have to do with all of our upcoming meetings. Council meetings, regular council meetings are scheduled for Tuesday, September 17th at 5:30 p.m. and Tuesday, October 8th at 5:30 p.m. We have a work session that's scheduled for Tuesday, September 10th at 5:30 p.m. We're in the midst of budgets, but we're always in budgets. But here we have intentional budget meetings so that we move up to the budget adoption in December. So we will review the maximum tax levy and the CIP on Tuesday, September 10th at 5:30, and we'll also hear the department presentations at that time. We will adopt the maximum tax levy on Tuesday, September 17th at 5:30, and then we move into more budget workshops. And that is Tuesday, October 29th at 5:30 p.m. and another budget work session on Tuesday, November 12th at 5:30 p.m. And then we adopt the tax levy and the budget on Tuesday, December 3rd at 5:30 p.m. And everyone is invited to join us during those work sessions, and all work sessions if you so please. And we have one proclamation this evening, and that is for the City of Burnsville's You Belong Here campaign. Whereas the City of Burnsville strives to be an inclusive place for residents and businesses, as well as visitors, and whereas the community embraces and celebrates its beautiful diversity, and whereas we recognize that continuing to warmly welcome new faces and businesses will further enrich our culture and opportunities for success. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Elizabeth Couts, Mayor of the City of Burnsville, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim the official adoption of our new brand and motto, City of Burnsville, You Belong Here, proclaimed this September 3rd, 2019. And we have a short video for you to watch. Marty?
Business belongs here. Arts, entertainment, and culture belong here.
Technology belongs here.
I belong here.
We belong here.
Fun belongs here.
Visitors belong here.
You belong here.
You belong here.
Students belong here.
Dreams belong here.
Yo pertenezco aquí.
Faith belongs here.
I belong here.
You belong here.
And ladies and gentlemen, you belong here. Thank you, Mr. Dong. Thank you. And to our consultants, where is she? Thank you so much. And we now move on to citizens' comments. This is the opportunity for anyone in the audience to address the council on an item that is not on the printed agenda and not an application form that will be coming before us at a future date. Is there anyone who wishes to address the council? Please. Mr. Taylor, I think I know what you're going to...
You do. It's our annual visit, and I don't think there is anything quite as connected between the theme of You Belong Here and the fire muster. Because as a one time each year, that the entire city, the entire community can come together, businesses, faith communities, nonprofit organizations, and the residents of the community Every year we have about 10, 15,000 people there, depending on the weather. And if you look outside and you see in the forecast, it's going to be a great time. Things start off this Wednesday with the block party, and they continue on to Thursday with our annual beer tasting.
Tell everybody where the block party is going to be.
The block party is at Nicollet Commons Park, and then the beer tasting as well is there. And then the main events, as you can see across the parking lot there, all take place at the Civic Center Park. So we're very excited to have you, and we really want to extend our appreciation for the council and the city giving it support this year. The financial support that you've given and the commitment you've made is absolutely essential for the long-term vitality of the fire muster, and we think for the community as well, as part of the whole being able to attract, retain, and make Burnsville a great place to live, work, and play.
So you better tell people what time the block party is going to be,
Okay,
and the
that's
beer
good.
tasting, and when does the event starts on Friday, time?
So and I'm doing this from memory, so I could be wrong, and if one of our liaisons wants to fill in here, it'd be awesome. So very packed in time-wise. So we begin on Thursday with the block party that I believe begins at 5 p.m. On Wednesday begins at 5 p.m. and goes till 8 p.m. And there'll be a band that night. I can't remember the name of it. It's Vince, maybe.
Steel drum band.
Steel drum band. That's right. Okay, and then Friday night activities begin, or Thursday night is the beer tasting. That's from 6 to 8 p.m. And that again is at Nicollet Commons Park, actually right out in front of the Ames Center. And then Friday night we are bringing back the. I'm so sorry.
Johnny Home Band.
The Johnny Home Band, who is absolutely awesome. They played. We had one of our largest crowds ever when they were here 2 years ago on Friday night, and he has been around for a long time. He has still have the excitement, the enthusiasm, and his voice might not be quite it was back in the 80s and 90s, but it is certainly an entertaining event. And then Friday night we actually have a fantastic band coming on called The World According to Garth. And it is one of the best Garth Brooks tribute shows in the country. So we're excited about that. The events on Saturday get underway very early in with the Heart of the City Run. That begins at 7 o'clock. We have the parade at noon. And then the events all going on all the way to 11 o'clock. The fireworks taking place about around 10-ish or so. You can plan on that.
And
So,
Friday, the gates open at?
5.
There you
5
go.
to 11. There you go. Thank you. All
Okay.
right. So we're excited, and again, council, we really appreciate your support for that.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Taylor. Thank you. All right. Anyone else? We'll move on to additions to the final agenda. Ms. Mascali, are there any emergency items to come before the body?
There are not, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, members of the council. No. Okay. We move on to the consent agenda. The consent agenda is a group of items that's considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion. However, an item on the consent agenda can be removed for a separate discussion and vote. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes an item on the consent agenda to be removed for a separate discussion and vote? Anyone who wishes an item to be removed? Ms. Mascoli?
No, Madam Mayor.
Members of the council? May I have an adoption of the consent agenda, please?
So moved. Second.
Councilmember Gustafson makes the motion, second by Councilmember Keeley. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay, and the motion carries. Thank you. We now move on to the regular agenda. And the regular agenda is a series of public hearings. Now, this evening, our procedure is going to be a little different. We'll open the public hearing for all of the different items, and then Ms. Desrude is going to go through all of them, and then I will close the public hearing at the end. But for each item, then, those folks who are interested in the item that she presents may come up and speak to that item if you so wish. So, Ms. Desrude, 5A is the resolution to adopt 2019 street improvement assessments.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Tonight I will be presenting our assessment hearings for our street improvement projects, the Travelers Trail, Heart of the City improvements, Heart of the City operations and maintenance, and then miscellaneous assessments. John Schmeling, our Assistant City Engineer, is over there at the staff table, and he will be able to answer any construction-related questions that come along. So our street improvement process began last February when council ordered the preliminary report for the street improvement projects. In January, the staff hosted a neighborhood meeting, and in March, the council held a public hearing to order the construction projects. April, the contracts were awarded. And then in May, staff hosted another neighborhood meeting before construction began. Just last month, in August, the assessment letters were mailed, which provided the final assessment amounts, payment options, and notified the property owners of the public hearing that we're having tonight. So special assessments for street projects are based on street frontage, which is the frontage abutting the street setback by 30 feet, and also by the street width, which is determined by the land use. So residential properties are assessed for a residential street width. Assessments pay for 40% of the street costs, and we do other work when we have the street projects going on, so those are not assessed. The utility work's not assessed, 60% of the street is not assessed, and then any other work that we add in that's associated with the street project is not assessed. Our assessment rates are set annually, and they're based on a cost per foot, and it's based on the average cost of the past 3 years. I'll have the rates with each project, so I'm not going to go over the rates right now, but they'll be presented with each project type. There are a few payment options. So one option is to prepay before October 31st of 2019. And new this year, we have an online e-check possibility for payment. So if you go to our website, make a payment, you can do that through your checking account as an e-payment, or you can mail or drop off a check, a paper check, I suppose. If you don't do that option, if you don't prepay, then the city will put a special assessment on property taxes starting in 2020. And then we also have a hardship deferral option. There are eligibility requirements, and so an application must be provided to show that you meet those requirements, and that needs to be submitted before September 30th so that staff can determine and then bring that back to council for their approval. The repayment terms, so if the property, if it goes to property taxes, the repayment terms are based on the amount of the assessment. So that a smaller amount has less of a repayment term, and that's listed here. So under $200 is a 1-year term, needs to be paid off in 1 year. Under $1,000 is 5 years. Under $2,000 is 10 years. And anything over $2,000 is 15 years. And our interest rate is 5%. And then we have, per state statute, the ability to object to the assessment, and that needs to be done in writing. It needs to be submitted by the end of the hearing for that project, and then the council may continue the hearing if they see it necessary. So I'm going to go through the different construction methods. We have 3 construction methods that we use, but we've packaged our construction methods into different contracts, and we'll have, as the mayor stated, we'll open the public hearing for each of those contracts to bring people up in smaller groups. The street reconstruction we had was on Portland and in part of the Highland View area. Street reconstruction consists of removing all pavement and curb, replacing water main, repairing other utilities, and repairing sidewalks and some other work that might be needed. The street reclamation consists of removing the pavement and gravel base, recycling that pavement for a new gravel base, and paving with new asphalt pavement. The only curb replacement is with spot repair. And then additionally, sidewalk and utilities are repaired as needed. We had quite a few reclamation areas this year: Byrne Woods, part of Highland View, River Hills, and part of Maple Island and Bluebell Bay. And then our last method is street rehabilitation. So rehab consists of removing and replacing the top 2 inches of pavement and then repairing sidewalk, curb, and utilities as needed. And this year we did have rehabilitation in parts of Maple Island and parts of Bluebell Bay. So how we packaged our projects this year, we have a Portland Highland View contract, which has partial reconstruction and partial reclamation. We have the Maple Island and Bluebell Bay, which is partially rehabilitation and partially reclamation. Byrne Woods is sort of big enough to stand on its own. It's all Reclamation. And then River Hills area is a state aid project, so that's its own contract, and that's all Reclamation. So we'll start with our 19101 Portland Highland View. Portland Avenue in the blue in the lower left is a reconstruction only. The first layer of pavement is already in place, and final pavement will happen in the spring of 2020. That's standard for us on a reconstruction, to wait to pave the final layer on a street reconstruction to allow one freeze-thaw cycle to occur before placing the wear course in the spring. For the Highland View portion of the contract, we have two methods that we used. We split the north portion of the project as a reconstruction area, and the south portion is reclamation. And we have, that will occur in phases, with the first area being reconstructed in mid-September, and then the second part in mid-October. The final paving will all be on that north part in 2020. For the south part of Highland View, the reclamation portion will be paved in October. So we have some before and after photos. This is in the Portland Avenue area, before and after. The after photo has just the first layer of pavement. In this area, we're still under construction, so we have curb in place on portions, but no pavement yet. And then on this area, we're partially paved as well. For costs, total project for this contract was about $5.5 million, of which about $693,000 is proposed to be assessed, or about 13% of the contract. And the bulk of the remaining costs are covered with utility funds and the infrastructure trust fund. The chart on the right shows, because we had, this contract has both reconstruction and reclamation, there are different rates depending on which part of the project you had. So we have a reconstruction rate for single family of $33.24 per foot, and reclamation of $19.92 per foot. And the other areas, multifamily and other uses are listed there as well.
Pardon me, Madam Mayor, may I insert a question?
Yes, Councilmember Keeley.
You started your presentation off with a graphic of a road, and you did an overlay that said 40% was based on assessments or funded through assessments. And then you're pointing out on this particular project that assessments were 13%. Can you explain why those two numbers are different?
Yes, so with a reconstruction, we do other things like utilities and other work that's not assessed. And then also we use the 3-year average, which ends up being less than a true 40%. So the 40% is the max we'll assess. But when we do the 3-year average, it ends up being less.
Thank you. I know most of our projects over the years, assessments for individual property owners ended up being in the 15% range, give or take a little. And you probably have a slide on how we compare to other cities. We're always very, very low when it comes to assessments. Are you going to touch on that later on too?
Do you want me to go to that slide? It's at the very, very end.
No.
Why don't we just move through your presentation, because that's a nice close.
Okay. I have it actually not as part of the presentation, but an extra slide if needed. So I can pull it up whenever
Definitely
you
use
like.
it. It's a good slide.
Okay.
I think it's important
It's
for people
needed?
to understand how
Okay.
we assess.
So this would be the public hearing portion for Portland and Highland View. But before calling the hearing, I'd like to note that the city received one written objection before and one just right before, but one a few days ago. The objection had to do with a contractor error, which resulted in some interior damage to their home. And the contractor's insurance company is still working with the homeowners. So staff recommends removing this particular property from the assessment roll to allow more time for the contractor and staff to work with the property owner. So at the end, when I make the recommendation, staff will recommend removing from the assessment roll 2413 Horizon Road.
And to continue it.
Yes, but indefinitely, we don't have a date certain for that.
Yeah.
And then we would bring it back for a separate hearing at the time when the issues are resolved.
Sure.
Handed out just prior to the meeting was another objection that work has, the concern was that work has not begun on the two streets. Our assistant city engineer has the schedule for those projects if you wanted to note that.
Talking about Highland View Avenue.
Yes.
So this week they'll be starting to put up a temporary water main. Their projected paving date is mid-October for first layer of asphalt.
Okay, very good. And
So, at this time, we would note that the public hearing is only for the Portland and Highland View areas, and then all other neighborhoods will be coming up.
okay, thank you, Ms. Desrud. Are there any questions from council for Ms. Desrud? Okay, thank you. This is a public hearing for all of our road reconstruction, rehabilitation, and reclamation. So I'm going to open it one time, and at this point, we're going to address the Portland Highland View areas of the assessment. And I see that Mr. Funkhauser, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, would you come to the podium, please? Good evening.
Yes, good evening. I live at 2501 Highland View Avenue, so right on the corner of Highland View Avenue and Highland View Lane. When this project was started, the original completion date was supposed to be in August. This meeting was supposed to be post our completion, and at that point there'd be a final assessment value. Obviously, they haven't started work in that area where my house specifically sits, in the Horizon area, which is adjacent to me. As noted, they haven't completed even the first round of paving yet. And even in the area down by the park, the reclamation on the boulevards and whatnot have not been started yet. So, I mean, in the case of myself, now I did notice that contrary to the letter that was sent, it was posted on the document here that payment by October 31st. My document says 30 days after this meeting, which for me was going to be, they're not going to be done, not even close, given the pace that they've been moving at. The first area has taken them 2 months, and they're expecting to maybe start next week in my part of the neighborhood. So respectfully, my request is that we follow the tenets of what was originally laid out, which was the assessment meeting held post the completion of the meeting, and that this be tabled or postponed until early November. For final assessment. The other part that I would like to add to that is I would assume that the city has some, we'll say, late completion clause with the contractor, because again, we were expected to be done by now. So is any of that recouping or savings going to be shared with the homeowners that are paying an assessed amount on that total value?
Ms. Desrud, can you address any of the questions that Mr. Funkhauser has presented, or would you like time to meet with for you and your colleagues to meet with Mr. Funkhauser?
So I'll defer to John to see if he could answer anything on the spot, and then.
We do have a contract that does have, options for liquidated damages if needed. Although the contract, they're only a couple weeks behind their original projected schedule, so I don't anticipate going after them for damages, because they will complete the project yet this year. I do have in writing from the contractor that the sod warranty will be extended through the spring, so that any dead sod that's found in the spring will be replaced at the contractor's expense. So I'm not concerned about the contractual obligation.
Mr. Peterson?
Sure, I can add something to this. When you were trying to reconstruct all the area in blue there, we couldn't have conceived that they would have been able to complete all that work by August. So many of the projects, like once we get to the Byrne, which is a lot bigger area, but then when you're just doing reclamation, we're able to do so. But when we're replacing all this water main and curb, we knew all along it would go into September, October in order to get this. I don't know the document that you're talking about that says that we'd be completed with this project in August. We never would have thought that would have been feasible.
Okay. Mr. Peterson, would you have a conversation with Mr. Funkhauser afterwards and look and see how that gets resolved, and so that he is satisfied with how this proceeds. Is that all right with you, Mr. Funkhauser?
Certainly.
Thank you. And Mr. Peterson is our Public Works Director.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Yes. Is Councilmember Keeley?
Clarification, Mr. Funkhauser also brought up something that I want to just make sure we get out in the open and fix if it needs fixing. He noted that the letter, the due date is 30 days from the date of this letter, but it's really publicized as October 30th. Are we sending a confusing message, or are there two different dates meant to be that way, or should we look at our process and make sure that we're always consistent on our dates for the due amount?
Ms. Desrude?
Yeah, so by law, we have to give 30 days, so that is why it says that 30 days from the approval we have to give for prepayment. We give longer, and so I have a note here to update our letter to be more clear.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good.
And the other is that, so when we look at that, just looking at the statute and see how we can make sure that we're in compliance with the law, and at the same time, how we put that information into the letter.
Good.
Thank you, Ms. Desrude. Mr. Peterson?
I think I'd also just like, he requested that the whole proceeding be moved back.
Mm-hmm.
We couldn't complete the process and make the 2020 tax statements if we were to move it back. But we've been doing these projects since 1990, and we've always had these projects paid back. I am 100% confident we will have payment back by the end of the
Perhaps
season.
one of the things we could add into that letter, because when I looked at the letter, that also weather has a factor for the delays.
And
And
I just don't think there's been a lot of delays necessarily. Obviously, it has been a lot of rain this year, but it was always anticipated this project would be going into October.
Okay. All right. Is there anything else? Is there anyone else who wishes to speak to the Portland Highland View assessment? Anyone? Thank you. We will now move on. Ms. Desrude.
So our next area is the Maple Island Bluebell Bay area. This area was a joint project with Lakeville, in which Lakeville took the lead on bidding the project and providing construction inspection for the project. So the parts that are shown on the map are clearly just the Burnsville portion, but the Lakeville portion extends south. It's a mix of reclamation and rehab throughout both areas. On this slide, we just have...
So one question, Ms. Desrude, because this is a partnership with Lakeville. Now, if we have residents, Burnsville residents who are here and are in the Lakeville construction site, are they being charged through Lakeville or Burnsville?
So Burnsville residents are being charged through Burnsville.
Okay.
The Lakeville project extends into Burnsville, and so any properties that are in the Burnsville city limits are part of this assessment hearing.
Okay. Just so I want to make sure that our residents understand that it's a partnership between Lakeville and Burnsville, leveraging our resources, so we partner with each other. And so that's how this is happening. But the assessment is still Burnsville, even though you may see Lakeville contractors.
That's correct.
Yeah,
Thank you for that clarification. So on this slide, we just have some before photos because this project, the Burnsville areas are in later phases of the entire project. So final paving for the rehabilitation areas are going to be the end of this month, and final paving for the reclamation areas, so green is the rehab areas, reclamation is in red, will be the end of October. The total project costs for the city's portion, so even though it's a joint project, this is just our portion, 1.8 million, of which about 400,000 or 22% is proposed to be assessed, or proposed to be paid for with special assessments. The bulk of the costs the remaining costs are from utility funds and the infrastructure trust fund. And then the chart on the right shows both reclamation and rehabilitation rates because it is a mixed project. And so at this time, we have the public hearing for this grouping, the Maple Island and Bluebell Bay. And prior to the meeting, the city staff had not received any written objections.
Okay, very good. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to the Maple Island Bluebell Bay project? Maple Island Bluebell Bay. Okay, seeing no one, we will move on. Ms. Desrude.
Okay, our next area is the Burnhaven Woods area. And this project area was substantially completed at the end of last month. It is a reclamation project only, but it did include a large storm sewer improvement at 138th and James Court. That storm sewer improvement was not part of the assessment. It was covered with the utility funds. So here are some before and after photos in Burnhaven Woods. Maybe some street sweeping needed on that one. And then our total contract is, total project cost for this contract is about $2.7 million, of which about $590,000 is proposed to be assessed, or 22%. And then, like I had said, we had a big storm utility portion of the project with that stormwater improvement and then infrastructure trust fund. And then this is only reclamation, so I'm showing just the reclamation rate. And so this would be the portion of the public hearing for the Burnhaven Woods. And at this time, the staff had not received any written objections.
Okay, is there anyone who wishes to speak to the Burnhaven Woods project? Burnhaven Woods project. Please come forward, give us your name and address for the record.
Okay, my name is Galen Gishweller. I'm on 138th. I was here in the spring and I spoke about the problem that we have on my street for the street flooding.
Yeah.
The city listened to me. John, he heard from me a few times. I just want to commend the city of Burnsville actually for following through on their project for upgrading the storm sewer. We've had a couple of hard rains since the street's been complete. We've had no backup at all on that street.
Nice.
In fact, it hasn't even went over the curb yet.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. I sleep better at night now when it does storm. There's also a gentleman by the name of Nils, who I think was overseeing that project. Very nice gentleman, answered all the questions that I had about it. And it was a mess, I will tell you that, but it wasn't because of the construction, it was because of Mother Nature, all the rain. So it was a little inconvenient for a couple of weeks, but it is very nice. The street is better than ever. The sewer is
functioning better.
Functioning perfect now. Only a couple of little drawbacks. Nobody pays attention to any of the stop signs now, and it has become a racetrack because of how smooth it is. So that's only a couple of complaints, but thank you very much, John. I know you've heard from me, and I appreciate your help.
You know, thank you so much for coming and saying that publicly about our personnel and our staff here. They do listen, and they do care. And they do a lot to make sure that we address the issues that are brought to them. So thank you so much, because they hear all the negativity, but for you to come in a public forum and commend them for their work, I appreciate that.
Well,
thank you so much.
They truly deserve it. All of you do. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak to the Burnhaven Woods project? Okay, seeing no one, we will move on. Ms. Desrude.
So our last street improvement project area is the River Hills Drive area. This project area is a reclamation only. The work began later than our other contracts because the Met Council was in the area in advance of the city to complete some sanitary sewer lining. So it was a good partnership in that they could get in and do their work and not do it after our road was finished. So once they were out of the area, we were able to get in. The area is being phased so that the road can be kept open with a narrow lane in each direction. It's anticipated that all final paving will be done by the end of October, and the work also includes bike lane striping on River Hills between Cliff and Trunk Highway 13 only, not the entire stretch of River Hills Drive, just between Trunk Highway 13 and Cliff Road, which is anticipated to be striped in late October. So here's a before and a during picture for you, and here's another one. For costs, the total project costs for this contract are about 2.9 million, of which about 346,000 is proposed to be assessed, or 12%. River Hills Drive is a state aid route, so about half of our costs for this project were funded through the state aid, our state aid allocation. The bulk of the remaining costs are covered from utility funds and then the infrastructure trust fund. And the chart shows just reclamation, as this has just reclamation in it. And so at this time, this would be the final portion of the public hearing for probably this and any that were missed. And for this area, the city has not received any written objections yet.
Okay. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to the River Hills project? Anyone who wishes to speak to the River Hills project? Seeing no one, we will move on. Ms. Desrude, so for the 2019 improvement assessments, you have one more slide and you're going to get to the total of the cost.
So I have the slide that shows what other communities are assessed.
And this is the $14 million grand total.
Yep, so certain communities don't do special assessments, Brooklyn Park, Minnetonka, St. Louis Park.
Well, they use franchise fees.
Yep, they use another method. Edina's 2016 average was about 10,000. Plymouth was about 8,000. I know Edina's doing some work to change their policy, so that number is probably not valid so much anymore. But so this is the comparison that we have from 2016, and probably could use a little update for 2020.
Okay, good. All right. So is there anyone else who wishes to speak during the public hearing for these projects? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing. Members of the council, we need to approve the assessments with the removal of the property owner that had the contract that had was their fault, and we're working through them and the insurance.
Right, and their address is 2413 Horizon Road.
Okay, so set aside 2415? 13. Yep. To be continued. I need approval for that, for
Make
a motion.
For staff's recommended. Motion to approve staff recommendation.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
I'm going to take Ms. Schultz a second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay, and the motion carries. Thank you very much, Ms. Desrude. Now we go to 5B, and that is the West Travelers Trail public hearing, and Ms. Desrude.
So this project included many improvements, included rehabilitation of West Travelers Trail between Burnsville Parkway and Pleasant Avenue, included construction of new on-street parking, concrete sidewalk, street lighting, organics receptacles, and 5 electric vehicle charging stations. The special assessments are only proposed for the work done for the rehabilitation of West Travelers Trail, and other funding sources were used for the remaining improvements. Here's a before and after from West Travelers Trail. And cost, so the total project cost was a little over 1 million, and assessment funding was 40% of the street rehab costs only. So that, like I had mentioned, there are many improvements made, but we are only calculating the assessment based on the street improvements. And this was done at a straight 40%. We didn't use our rates. We used a straight 40% for this, or about $88,000 in special assessments. The pie chart has lots of pies, including a deed grant, some remaining TIF, utility funds, street lighting funds, recycling funds, assessments, and infrastructure trust fund. So this would be the public hearing for this project.
Okay. I will now open the public hearing for the 19-105 project, which is Travelers Trail and the Heart of the City improvements. Yes, please come to the podium and give us your name and address for the record.
Alan Hetherington, Uptown Landing, 19104. Where is it at?
It's coming up.
That's what I wanted to understand.
Okay. Okay. Anyone who wishes to speak to this public hearing for Travelers Trail and the Heart of the City improvements? Seeing no one, members of the council.
Move to approve.
Councilmember Gustafson makes the motion, second by Councilmember Workman. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay, and the motion carries. Thank you very much. We now go to 5C, and this too is a public hearing. And this is the 2019 Streetscape Operations and Maintenance Assessment. Ms. Desrud.
So in the heart of the city, there's an increased level of amenities that are provided, including colored concrete, special street lighting, banners and snowflakes, hanging baskets and boulevards, and median mowing and irrigation. There are 2 levels of maintenance done depending on the area. The streets with the purple color have a higher level amenities, and that's called phase 1, with an assessment of $10.35 per foot. The areas in green have fewer amenities. That's called phase 2, with an assessment of $5.77 per foot. So the total assessments for the heart of the city are $145,500. Assessments are calculated based on the actual operations and maintenance costs associated with the streetscape amenities in the heart of the city. 50% of the costs are assessed to adjacent property owners, and 50% is paid by the city. For properties with multiple owners, such as condos, assessment is divided equally between all owners. And so prior to this meeting, we had not received any written objections on heart of the city maintenance.
Okay. I will now open the public hearing for the 2019 Streetscape Assessment. Yes, now you may come up and speak.
All right.
Okay.
So what are you doing with the money? Seriously, because this has been going on, what, 8-9 years now?
Oh, more.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah.
And so I'm really curious what you're doing with the money, because I figure that you all have collected close to, if not more than, $2 million.
Oh. Well, I will have our staff speak to that, but I live in the heart of the city, so.
I realize, did you
yes,
get an assessment?
And I had just paid my assessment.
Very good.
Yes.
But like, I'm very serious. I want to understand what you're doing with the money.
Sure. Okay. Who would like to take that? Ms. Desrud, Mr. Peterson, who would like to take?
I can give it a try. Could you go back to the slide that
Yes.
shows? Basically, we have staff who is dedicated to the heart of the city, equipment that's dedicated to the heart of the city, the cost with these types of lights, the irrigation systems that we don't do anywhere else, the mowing we don't do anywhere else. It's not a fund of building new stuff. This is maintaining the system that we got, and there's a much enhanced level of service in this area than we have anywhere else in the city. And as Jen said, basically what we're doing is the city's paying half of it and the residents are paying the other half.
So do you feel like you're doing a good job? Because I mean, I can walk down Nicollet.
Please come, but please, so
I can walk down Nicollet and I can see where you have the bricks, and they're not maintained. So I'm really questioning how you're maintaining.
Mr. Peterson.
Madam Mayor, we do have operating budgets, and salt is wreaking some havoc on some of our pavers. I won't disagree. We are replacing a certain percentage of those each year via operating budget that is in this particular area. So we're trying to take off manageable chunks. I know they did one this year, and I know they did one last year, but when we're moving more to salt, it does have some drawbacks, but it does make the public safer.
Do you have any other questions? It takes personnel to do the enhanced services. It has a lot more amenities in terms of the landscaping and the plantings around the area. has hanging baskets, and we do have,
By my house,
where do you live?
Uptown Landing.
You're in Uptown Landing.
I am.
And so there are parts of Uptown Landing, pardon me?
You have hanging baskets behind the parking ramps. You don't have any hanging baskets by my home.
You know, I think you are in the purple area on the Parkway, and you are on Uptown Landing.
That is correct.
Yes, and so, Mr. Peterson, I think there are baskets on Uptown Landing.
Well, I'm afraid they're not. I live there. I would know.
Yeah, and I drive that street all the time because I'm down on Nicollet and the Parkway.
There are,
Yeah,
there are on Nicollet, in the Uptown, and on the Parkway
Yeah.
by the Russ Jensen's. Absolutely. There are none
Yeah.
by my home. I mean, so if you're telling me that there are amenities that you're offering, then they should be offered everywhere.
Okay, Mr. Peterson.
As the slide shows you, there are two phases
Yeah.
of assessments. We got phase one that has more and phase two that has less. The hanging baskets, they are, I can't say that those follow the exact boundaries of phase one, but it's generally associated with those particular areas. The baskets aren't necessarily as one of our higher cost operations in there, but they are more closer to the Nicollet Commons Park.
Okay. We'll continue to take a look at that. Ms. Schultz, Councilmember Schultz?
Is there, anyway, because it appears you still have questions and you would like a breakdown, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
please.
Is there any way that we could get that segment of the budget segmented out for our resident so that he can more easily see that? Because like, I know, like me looking through the budget, since I've been doing it, I'm understanding it and I'm getting through it, but it's a little overwhelming for some of our residents. So is there any way we could bite-size that so that he could see what that breakdown is?
Why don't we have you sit down with our staff and they can walk you through the budget so that you understand what's going on?
Fair enough.
All right, very good. Thank you so much. And you can get a card from Mr. Peterson. Okay. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak to the 2019 Streetscape assessments? Anyone else? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing for this portion. 5C, members of the council, Councilmember Keeley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I am like the gentleman who just spoke, and yourself, Madam Mayor. I live in the heart of the city, and I did receive my assessment letter, and it's split, I believe, between our HOA association. Mine happens to be about $108 or something like that. I know in past years we've had complaints from people who don't live in the heart of the city and wondered why their street didn't get all the extra plantings, the trees, the bricks, the extra care, the 5 a.m. backing up of the beep, beep, beep trucks plowing the snow. But there is a fairly significant visual difference between the heart of the city and the rest of the city, and not that the rest of the city isn't well kept. It is. There's just more amenities in the heart of the city that require more maintenance, and I see it now that I live down there. I moved out from outside the heart of the city into the heart of the city, and from a value standpoint, I don't have a problem with paying $108 a year to have all of those additional amenities and treatments and plantings and that. The boulevards are quite dramatically better. I mean, there's all kinds of plants throughout the boulevard, and so and there's a lot of maintenance to go into that. As Mr. Peterson pointed out, there's crews out there all the time maintaining all of these additional amenities that aren't in existence necessarily in the rest of the city. So to me, the assessment is justified. It was ironic listening to the gentleman. Generally, as I mentioned, most years in the last 13 years I've been on council, we've had people come and complain and written to us complaining that why is the heart of the city getting all this attention? There's a bill being sent out to the heart of the city residents to pay for
And
half
businesses.
of it. Right? Yeah, and the businesses too. So.
Okay. All right, I have closed the public hearing. Members of the council, if there are no other remarks or questions for Ms. Desrude, I need a motion, please, to adopt the resolution for the 2019 Streetscape Operations and Maintenance Assessment.
Move to approve.
Councilmember Keely makes the motion.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Workman. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay, and the motion carries. Thank you very much. We now move on to 5D, and 5D is the resolution to adopt the 2019 Miscellaneous Assessment. Ms. Desrude.
So this is our last public hearing for special assessments tonight.
I don't know if it's a public hearing, Ms. Desrude. It's just a resolution to adopt the 2019 Miscellaneous Assessment?
It should be a public hearing.
It should be a public hearing?
Yes.
Okay, it doesn't say that.
I will make note for next year.
Thank you.
So this year we had $2,580 in unpaid false alarm costs to be assessed, $6,895 in driveway apron upgrades that were associated with street projects, but they're upgrades, so they're assessed separately. And we didn't have any other public improvements or development fees this year, so there's 0 for that. And so this is a public hearing, sorry about them. I'll get the agenda next year. And we have not received any objections on this to date.
Okay, I will now open the public hearing for miscellaneous assessments. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to the miscellaneous assessments? Anyone who wishes to speak to the miscellaneous assessments? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing. Members of the council?
Motion to approve?
Councilmember Workman makes the motion. Second by Councilmember Schultz. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay, and the motion carries. I will now recess the Burnsville City Council meeting so that the Economic Development Authority meeting can convene. President Gustafson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll call to order the Economic Development Authority. Are there any additions to the final agenda? Please let the record show all commissioners are here as well. Moving on to that, we have one thing on we have the consent agenda, which is approval of the minutes and a resolution approving amendment for contract for private redevelopment between the Burnsville Economic Development Authority, KSH Development LLC, and Chase Commercial Properties LLC. And I would need a motion for the consent.
Motion to approve. Sorry.
Second, go ahead.
Got a motion and a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? And it passes. Seeing nothing else on the agenda, I need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion?
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And I turn it back over to you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will now reconvene the Burnsville City Council meeting, and members of the council, there are no other items to come before us this evening.
Motion to adjourn.
And
Second.
Councilmember Keely makes the motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Gustafson. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say nay. And the motion carries. Good night, and thank you for being with us.